Hello everyone, how's it going? So this is a compressed version of the Blue Protocol closed beta test feedback report on their website. I made a video earlier with a little bit more detailed look at it, but this one's just going to be looking at just the points in general of what changed. So let's get started. First up is character creation. There's plans to increase the character creation parts and categories. They're going to look at adding additional voices, and some character creation options will only be able to be done in a beauty salon area in the game. Next is clothing and accessories. Additional clothing types will be added, additional accessory types will be added. Plan to increase the number of locations where accessories can be attached. Underwear, or maybe it's like innerwear, I'm not sure exactly, but it is still in development, so that's going to be added later. Next up is battle action. They're looking at adding the ability to adjust timing for double-click dodge input, looking at adjusting lock-on camera, looking at adding more options for what effects are displayed, going to fix movement animation when drawing a weapon, going to adjust enemy knockback. Next up is battle UI. Going to add key display to shortcut buttons to make them easier to understand what key to press. Plans to change shortcut palette to a shortcut ring to make it easier to use. Looking at ways to make remaining times of buffs and debuffs easier to understand. Going to change colors of skill, buff, debuff items, etc. to make them easier to distinguish. There are plans to change the class unique gauge designs. Will be make adjusting the positions of them possible as well. And will adjust the reticle position of close range classes. Next up is about players. We'll add explanation about what each parameter or stat does. We'll make raising adventurer rank easier to understand. Revamping profile screen to allow more ways to show off one's character, and plans to add things like title achievements and trophies. Next up is named enemies or field bosses and drops. We'll adjust aggro range and distance, looking at adjusting how quickly enemies attack after spawning, looking at decreasing aggro range of enemies when a player has a large level difference, planning to adjust number of materials needed for crafting, planning to adjust named enemy times, spawn times, and specific spawn conditions, going to adjust the named enemy HP, looking at making enemies easier to see within effects and increasing size of named enemies. And they don't have plans for rare weapon drops from enemies. Looking at increasing the player joy when an item drops. Next up is boss enemy and raid bosses. So first up is the core battle concept of enemy party versus player party was not fully implemented, so more strategy should be needed once more locations are added, or once this is more fully implemented. Because there was only certain locations that there was present, like certain events or certain parts of the dungeons that it was located in during the closed beta. But once more of that is added, more strategy should be needed. Other than that, enemy HP during the closed beta test was low overall. Plans to increase enemy health, set resistant parameters, and increase attack patterns. Looking at adjusting elemental weaknesses, resistances. When within a certain distance of boss health will be displayed. Looking at making enemy spawns during boss fights more obvious. We'll adjust raid portal location. Next up is classes and skills. We'll add more skills and diversity to skills within classes. Looking at changing the system of how skills are acquired. Looking at making roles of classes more defined. New classes are in development. This is a big one, yeah. So new classes are in development. That's been confirmed. Looking at ways of displaying information about leveled up skill power, effects, EP cost. We'll add equipment sets. Looking at adding ability to view other classes' skill information. Looking at ways to make skill information and such more easily accessible or visible. We're going to be adjusting the Blast Archer normal attack derivatives so one is able to use them more quickly. I believe these are like the skills that you could use after a certain point in the Blast Archer attack chain. Also reworking the Blast Archer normal attack derivatives themselves, so they're also reworking them. Looking at increasing leveling options besides repeating missions. Looking at ways to make skill charge level more apparent. We'll be adding something like a training dummy. Next up is the Battle Imagines. We'll strengthen Imagine effects abilities, planning to make abilities somewhat unique. Looking at adjusting appearance of Imagine's effects. Looking at ways to sync high-level Battle Imagines with one's current level. Next up is a Mount Imagine. Plans to have ways to restore mount energy outside of towns, as well as an automatic recovery. They're going to stop mount energy from decreasing while standing still. Add additional mounts players can swap between. They do not have plans to get rid of the mount energy system. Next up is SC and BGM. We'll be adding more BGM or music, and we'll make adjustments to sounds as needed. Next up is Dungeon Party Guilds. Fixing bugs where players could go through walls during time attacks. We'll add ways to check if a player went outside the standard area, like going through the wall there. We'll remove players from rankings who have gone outside the time attack area. So there's a time attack ranking. So there you have these. They will be able to check if a player went outside the area, and they will be able to remove them from the ranking if this occurs. Looking at different ways to fix dungeon issues, such as making defeating all enemies in area a requirement to move forward. Ignoring enemies, or for example, if you ignore enemies, they will appear in boss fights or make the boss stronger. Or looking at perhaps like adding rewards for defeating additional enemies in the boss, the dungeon areas. Next up is plans to add more information about the party search feature on the official site. So this was something that was present, but it was overlooked during the closed beta. And plans to add something like a guild feature. Next up is towns. Requests were made to move the class change location, but NPCs of different features were spread throughout the town to avoid players from grouping up too much in one area. Those small adjustments to NPC or like those feature placements may be made. Things like housing, fishing, and cooking are planned to be added as an update after the official release. Currently there are no plans for trading or shops because it doesn't fit well with the crafting system, but they may be reconsidered as new features are added. Planning to add a feature to turn off weapon visibility in town. Planning to add options to control the maximum number of players displayed. We'll be looking at compressing the file size for loading and network data. Next up is quests. We'll fix bug with quest route marker and plans to give additional information about the quest locations. Planning to add ways to skip quests if already completed. For example, if a quest is to create a weapon and a player already has that weapon completed, they would be able to skip that step. Next up is field and maps. Looking at adjusting field exploration marker positions and adding bonuses for finding them. No plans to increase field enemy experience. Will make it easier to select teleportation portals on map even if same location as other icons. Looking at adding shortcuts for map teleportation and such. Looking at automatically adjusting the minimap size. Looking at adjusting the minimap display priority. While not initially planned, looking at adding minimaps to dungeons. Next up is matching channel, zone, and server information. So first up is looking at reworking the mission matching system. Looking at fixing problems with party grouping features. Planning to add ways to join other players' channels. Looking at adding a private channel feature for player events. We'll fix an issue that caused players to disconnect after bosses. And plan to increase the server performance when there's a large amount of chat. Next up is UI, HUD, and menu. Planning to add more filter options to chat log. Plan to make the log of other players being defeated more easy to recognize. Looking at adding tab, separation, grouping features to the chat window. Plans to increase the number of quests that can be displayed. We'll add more descriptions to options. There was a number of requests for options that already exist, so plan to introduce different options on the website. Plan to improve controls when clicking and moving items. Plan to make chat font more visible. Plans to make window flow after purchasing or crafting items more convenient. So after you buy something, what window you return to, they plan to make that a little bit more convenient. Plans to increase button size and to decrease the cursor travel distance required. Looking at adjusting how deep one needs to traverse through menus based on how often the menu is used. So something you use more often will be easier to get to more quickly. You don't have to go through a bunch of windows to get through it. Next up is talk, stamps, gestures, follow, and followers. So looking at reworking the friend system, making it easier to use. Looking at making it possible to switch between stamps, gestures when in talk mode. Plans to add option to select players from chat log. We'll add mouse over preview for stamps. Looking at adding notifications for unread chat. For after, if you're in the crafting station and you can't see the chat and you come back out, you'll be notified if there was something that you missed. Looking at allowing normal input while not inputting text in talk mode. We'll allow chat during missions under certain conditions. For example, if you're in the same party, you'd be able to chat. Currently, during this closed beta test, you weren't able to chat at all for during dungeons and whatnot. Next up is bag storage and appraisal. Considering adjusting initial bag size. Bag size will be able to be increased through playing the game. Already appraised items will be able to be sent back to storage without going back to town. More powerful consumables are planned to be added. And items will initially be found in an unappraised state. But as your character grows, you will be able to find items already appraised. And like I stated earlier, once you have these items that are already appraised, you'll be able to send them back to town without needing to go back to town. So you'll be able to send them back to your storage immediately. Next up is certain items. Drops that makes players excited to find will be left unappraised in an unappraised state. So I guess rare drops and things like that, things that players are excited to find and makes them wonder what it is. They'll need to go back to town to see what it is. We'll fix bug with camera zooming when scrolling through storage. Plan to add more sorting features of storage and maintain previous sort state. Next up is gathering, crafting, refinement, and fusion. Plans to improve slider bar for item number selection, etc. Looking at ways to distinguish between gathering points through color or text. Looking at adding a wish list feature to see how many materials you collected so far to keep make keeping track of materials needed for weapon crafting easier. Plans to add the ability to add items and refine weapons right to one's current level. We'll add item filter to the refinement item window. Looking at ways to overwrite or remove fusions from weapons. Plans to make crafting take time based on progress through game, so low level crafting will be fast, high level crafting will take longer. Next up is about camera and screenshots. Players want to zoom out the camera farther, but collisions with structures, etc. must be considered. Looking at what camera distance won't cause problems. Looking at improving the lock on camera. Looking at improving screenshot mode features. Looking at adding SE, like a sound effect to notify players when a screenshot has been taken. Looking at adding options for the Bandai Namco text on screenshots to be adjusted. So looking at adding options for the Bandai Namco text location on screenshots to be adjusted. We'll add key config option for the screenshot button. Next up is a quality of life feature. We'll make it easier to select crafting stations, NPCs, or portals, even when surrounded by other players. Next up is the gamepad. Looking at adding D-pad support, increased button customability, and improving convenience overall. As for other things, looking at adjusting the length of the in-game day, but length of time of certain parts of the day, such as like sunrise or sunset, will not be adjusted. Because it is planned to be used for important notifications, the notification bar or a ticker that goes across the screen will continue to be present during cutscenes. Looking at adding a theater mode to look back at previous cutscenes. So 4K output was possible with supported GPUs during this closed beta test, but UI and menus are only full HD. And this full 4K support is not currently an officially supported feature. Also because of the anime style graphics in the game, even if resolution is increased to 4K, the differences are not that apparent. So currently the plan is to dedicate development resources to other parts of the game. Full screen mode is planned to be added once a full screen bug is fixed. Vertical sync on-off will be added. And CPU load memory usage will be looked at as needed as changes are made to the game. Alright, so that was the quick rundown of all the feedback of the closed beta test. I have another video that's a lot longer if you want a little bit more detailed look at my thoughts and things. And also I had a video of the live stream as well. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope to see you next time.